Welcome to Voices in Leadership, live streamed worldwide from the Leadership Studio at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. I'm Dean Michelle Williams. The goal of Voices is to highlight the experiences of leaders confronting major public health frontiers and to better understand effective leadership and how it can affect change. I hope you find this program engaging and informative. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, and welcome to those of you here in the studio and to our viewers online around the globe. I'm Erik Anderson, the Director of Voices in Leadership. This series focuses on effective leadership to create positive change in public health. We're broadcasting from the Leadership Studio, where the programs and related content have received over 4 million views to date and counting. Today, we host a discussion entitled Building a Better City with former Massachusetts Representative Jeffrey Sanchez and Mayor Steve Benjamin. Stephen K. Benjamin has served as the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, the city's first African-American mayor, since 2010. In 1999, at the age of 29, Benjamin was appointed to South Carolina Governor Jim Hodges' cabinet as director of the state's Department of Probation, Parole, and Pardon Services. In his first term as mayor, his leadership helped cut unemployment by roughly half and secured billions of dollars in new regional capital investment in the midst of a national recession. Re-elected for a second term by a 30-point margin in November 2013, Mayor Benjamin's administration has been characterized by his firm belief in Columbia's potential and intense focus on job creation. In December 2017, Mayor Benjamin initiated a city ordinance that banned the attachment of bump stocks and trigger cranks in the city of Columbia, making Columbia the first city in the nation to do so. He's a firm believer in common sense, bipartisan leadership and endeavors to implement policies and programming that provide the best course of action for city residents. Before I turn this discussion over to our moderator, Representative Jeff Sanchez, a spring 2019 Mentoral Senior Leadership Fellow here at the Chan School, please join me as we welcome Mayor Steve Benjamin to the Voices in Leadership series at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I won't repeat that incredible introduction that Erik just gave us, but to say thank you for coming again to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health.
I love it when people read my bio just like I wrote it.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great?
It's wonderful.
Well, in that, you know, you've had this great distinguished career. You've done a lot of incredible things, and you've served as an inspiration to so many in your community and beyond. But before all of that, you know, who's Steve Benjamin? Who's that young man that felt that he could do big things, wow. Especially coming from Queens, New York, down to Columbia, South Carolina.
First of all, we don't talk about that in Columbia. My parents are from Orangeburg, South Carolina. Folks who may not be familiar, it's about 45 miles southeast, right between Columbia and Charleston. And they did what a lot of African Americans did in the last century. They were in that last wave of folks who left the South, heading north, looking for new opportunities for their families. My brother had been born in Orangeburg. I was not yet a part of the family. Born and raised in Queens, and just spent the first 17 years of my life in South Jamaica, Queens. The son of my mother was a career. AT&T, New York Telephone, 9X, Verizon, a Ma Bell employee, and my dad worked a number of different jobs, primarily as a painting contractor. My first job, of course, working for him. Grew up in a house full of hope and love and opportunity, and really it's helped animate my public and private life over the last several years. The reality that so many of our children, people talk about schools failing or other systems failing. The reality is that schools are building, and we usually have pretty qualified teachers in those buildings. We have a disproportionate number of our kids, who come to school not ready to learn because they're dealing with adult issues at home. I've never had to worry about love or shelter or safety or nutrition, all those issues. I came out of a loving household, and with the exception of being a teenage knucklehead like most of us were in those years, came out of a really strong environment, and still literally to this day supported by my mom and dad. They now live in Columbia and help us raise our girls.
That's great. And so you talk about being a link in the chain of history. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
Man, it means I realize, and I'm even more excited now that my girls, we have I keep saying my girls, I didn't birth any children. Our 14-year-old daughter Bethany and our youngest Jordan Grace, she's 12, realize that they are part of a mosaic, a chain of events and people who contribute to this incredible story, particularly the story of the African seed and the American son, but indeed the story of America, this behemoth, this experiment that's defined the Western world for the last several centuries. I'm here when I come to special and highfalutin places like Harvard or have meetings at the White House and other places. I'm wearing the cufflinks of Reverend John Wilson, who was a civil rights worker, educator, minister, and in South Carolina. He and his wife, Donella Brown Wilson, and so many neighbors joined George Elmore, who was the protagonist in a lawsuit that first opened up the South Carolina Democratic primary in 47, 48, which at that time was the only real game in town. There were no Republicans in South Carolina back then. Believe it or not, there were no Republicans back then. But his daughters gave me these cufflinks, and they remind me of the labors of so many men and women who will never go with formal recognition, but who laid the foundation for me even to suggest that I want to serve in public life, that I want to help contribute to the betterment of my community or this country. And I realize I'm standing on broad shoulders, and it's my job now to present my shoulders to generations here and those yet unborn. And so realizing I'm a piece of the puzzle, and I've got to make sure that I respect the service of those who came before us, but more importantly, that I continue to make sure that the promise of this great country is here for kids and others who come behind us.
And in everything that we come up against, everybody, right? There's a fork in the road, you know? It's Mayor Benjamin, but it could have easily have been, you know, Steve Benjamin, the attorney working in a large law firm.
Yeah, sure.
But you made a big choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did that happen? Were there incidences that stuck out? Aside from your children being the personal inspiration,
sure.
What did you see, especially because here at the Chan, the School of Public Health, the students they're so hungry to figure out, okay, where do I put all of this passion that I have to help people?
Sure. When that die was cast, that fork in the road came years before I was ever a lawyer. I mean, it was Steve Benjamin this path, and Steve Benjamin, who was suspended from high school twice. And had just twice, and had to go. And when I told that story for the first time publicly at my State of the City address, I forgot I'd never told my. No, it was not an announcement. I forgot I'd never told my children that story. And you should see my youngest, her eyes. She gets these bug eyes, and I had to go to night school to finish high school, and I say that I was on a path. I was not taking the road less traveled by, and because of the influence of my parents and some guidance counselors, I wound up being a kid who took the SAT late, applied to college late, but did really well in standardized testing, and I got into the colleges of my choice, and wound up at the University of South Carolina, surrounded by in a loving environment by some incredible mentors who put me on track to really start realizing that I could use all that energy I had to really start fighting for social change. So I got involved as an NAACP youth leader, stayed involved in student government and student bar association, and early on I realized that I had a whole lot more fun outside the classroom than I did in the classroom, and later on that translated was the same in practicing law. I mean, I've enjoyed practicing law. I think I'm a pretty good lawyer, but I really love serving the public. I love serving the public.
More than a pretty good lawyer. Yeah. They've all recognized you for all your hard work.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Mm-hmm.
And the city itself. Tell us a little bit about the city. It's a majority people of color city. It's dynamic.
We're not. We're actually majority white.
I was looking at the breakdown, and I was like, you got a pretty good mix.
We have, and that's one thing. If you have not been to Columbia, South Carolina, please come visit us. We're the city's. We're the first planned capital city in America. Birth March 17th. We celebrate our birthday. We are currently have citizens primarily driven by the University of South Carolina and our other wonderful colleges, 2 HBCUs, seminaries. We have the Army's largest training base in the world in Fort Jackson, state government. We have citizens and residents from every one of the 194 sovereign nations of the world. I mean, so there's this incredible environment there that allows us to touch people from around the world. South Carolina, as many people don't know, has more European foreign direct investment than any per capita than any state in the country. There's this opportunity to really act locally and think globally and use the position of the city. We've been wonderful stewards of our fiscal resources. Big believer that if you take care of people's money, they give you a lot of latitude to do other things. We finished 7 of the last 9 years with a budget surplus. We've not had a tax increase in a decade. We've invested heavily in the arts, 70% increase in public safety funding. Continue to invest in our children and between free summer camps and the like. There's so much more always to do, but it's an awesome place that's going through an incredible revitalization, much like you're seeing around the country and around the world. We're seeing people rush back to urban centers, and now in this country, 85.5% of our citizens live in cities and metro economies. 89% of the jobs are there. 92% of our nation's GDP is created in cities and metro areas. So we've benefited from that, but just trying to be very intentional about our growth, not growing for growth's sake, and trying to make sure it's inclusive growth that allows you to become the city that you want to be. Recognizing that we're not a gerrymandered congressional district. We are a living, breathing organism of citizens and folks who may not be citizens, but who also we have the same obligations to. And it's our job to make sure that we speak to the needs of a very diverse group of individuals. And we've tried to do that. We try to lead from the front, sometimes pushing hard in some areas in which we feel the city needs to lead, and certainly be a leader in the South. And we've taken a few arrows because of it.
So how do you get to do that? I mean, how do you sew it all together? Especially since, again, you have so many, the economy is pretty diverse. The people are diverse themselves. The ideas are very diverse, as we've seen from some of the ideas that you've put forward, throughout the years.
Sure. It's I think it has to start with the intellectual honesty and emotional honesty that two people equally yoked who may be people of goodwill might look at the same thing and see it very differently. I mean, so first of all, at the very beginning, recognizing you have to respect diverse opinions and diverse views. That you got to go do your homework. You got to make sure you have the data and research to support your position. That you're always articulating a position that doesn't just speak about Columbia in 2019, but you're speaking very clearly about where you want to be in 2029 and 2039. And once you decide that's the direction you want to go in, and you spend your time coalition building and building some consensus. Once consensus building is over, you got to lead. I mean, you've got to lead, and the stakes are really just too high. So we've had some ups and downs over the years, but I think folks have respected the fact that we don't mind taking tough positions. If it's we live in the American South where where Second Amendment is a major issue, of concern in public discourse. I ran the state's second largest law enforcement agency. I am a gun owner. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I own firearms, but I also believe that with gun rights come gun responsibilities, and that there are certain types of weapons. That there are certain. We talked about a bump stock ban. Certain additions to firearms that shouldn't be on the street. We shouldn't have ghost guns where people are making guns, literally making guns at home without serial numbers, and the trigger cranks and bump stocks. That there ought to be some responsibility if someone loses their firearm, if someone steals your firearm, to report that to the police department.
Let's pull back a little bit. How were you able to do that? How were you able to get people in a room to be able to talk about that, especially in such a strong Second Amendment state, to have these conversations about enacting an extreme risk protection order? Here in Massachusetts, we were so proud of ourselves. It's a little different. I mean, we had some challenges, but again, it's such a strong, and it's not only that, it's the bump stock issue. It's also, I mean, I think there's about 4 or 5 different pieces that you took on by taking this on. So how were you able to do that? And how did you build trust with people that they could count on it?
And we'll have our second reading on our extreme risk protection order ordinance next week. We'll have a new hate intimidation ordinance that we're passing, and also passing gun-free school zones next week. And I expect, just as the first reading, these votes will be unanimous. We have a very diverse council. And if you could put people somewhere on the political spectrum, that we have everyone represented there. And I think the fact we've been leading with our heads and leading with our hearts. And the reality is that when you get anywhere else in the country outside of Washington, D.C., the vast majority of Americans are where we are on these issues, and making sure that not only do you bring the credibility of just good data and common sense, that you bring your law enforcement community with you. When I show up on an issue, our chief of police and our sheriff are also there, and they agree with us. I mean, it takes work, but I think when people realize that you're informed, that you've done your homework, and that you're resolute. That you got your head up, but you also have it down. You're going straight ahead.
So help us understand that a little bit, because remember, so you just mentioned your council, but at the same time, you know, you're sitting with a legislator, and a former legislator, and sometimes the mayors and the legislators, we have special relationships with each other, right?
Sure.
How, you know, and there was, you know, when you first started, you did have some challenges, and how were you able to work with folks, or how were you able to move forward? Because sometimes you're not going to see eye to eye, but at the same time you have to maintain respect in the relationship.
Sure. And for those of you not familiar with the geography of our city, we're about 5 blocks from the state capitol. So whenever someone's not happy with Columbia, usually it means the state house, not the city. But when we moved to ban bump stocks, there were several of our friends in the legislature who took us to task, and it's introduced some bills to preempt us from moving forward with that ordinance. Not a few months later, of course, President Trump and Attorney General Sessions indicated their plans to also ban bump stocks, and that opposition faded away. It's amazing how things happen.
But at the same time, those conversations were happening.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and we don't mind stepping up. Some of you may remember when the Confederate battle flag came down in 2015 in South Carolina. It was to say that the relationships were strained would be an understatement. We got word that the State House Committee had approved at the State House protesting the same day for the Ku Klux Klan of Western North Carolina and the New Black Panther Party of North Florida. They both went to the rally same time, same day. And they both got permits somehow. We don't control that process. But monitoring social media, our law enforcement agencies were disturbed. We thought we would be Charlottesville before Charlottesville was Charlottesville, and decided we needed to do something. So we called a special meeting of our city council, and we decided that the right-of-way surrounding the state capitol, we would make it a public park, and would ban firearms in that perimeter. We enforced it. We were sued immediately. We won on constitutional grounds, and we lost on state preemption grounds, and we had to pay legal fees of opposing counsel. It was, just being frank, the best $5,000 or so we've ever spent, and we did the right thing. And I think if it's clear that you're being thoughtful and compassionate and doing the right thing, then you can rest at night. I mean, there are more than enough issues here domestically and globally to keep us up at night. We ought not be up at night the things that we can actually impact.
But as a mayor, you're on the ground. At the same time, you're in the stratosphere. How do you straddle the two, especially when you're taking on these really challenging issues that have so much emotion attached to them? You know, again, how do you, especially right now, you know, we're all so charged up these days. How do we get to those points where it's okay, All right, everybody, let's simmer down for a second.
It's difficult. It's difficult because obviously you can easily get into the heat of the moment and realize, and you have to kind of step back and realize, okay, it's my job to calm the situation down so we can actually have a real dialogue.
But don't you get challenged on that, where people say, "Well, Mr. Mayor, this is where I want to see you do X." How do you handle that?
Absolutely. I thank them for their opinion. I thank them for their opinion. If they have information that I love to read still that a kid who loved reading his weekly reader and learning about the world. So if you have information to back up your position, please send it to me. And I met with some folks just a couple weeks ago, and we couldn't have been more diametrically opposed on an issue. And I knew it before them, but I promised them an audience. We sat there, we had a wonderful back and forth, and I think we both heard each other's opinions, and my position didn't change, and neither did theirs. But I think we afforded each other a respectful civil environment in which we could have discourse and share our positions. People, particularly in the world in which we live right now, where not only is civil discourse lacking or reason lacking, but also just an agreed upon set of facts, it makes things very difficult, and it's so important that we kind of hold the line, continue to respect each other's opinions, but on those issues where there's no compromise, where we're talking about issues that go to your values or just the way in which we treat each other as fellow human beings. I just think you hold tight those issues. All the other issues, we can always spend some time talking about and negotiating some of those issues, but most of those issues, some of us may see them as issues of some say that they're enshrined in our Constitution. Some think they're the result of natural law, God's law, whatever it happen to be. Those you don't bend or break on those issues.
So as a mayor and other things that you've done, you've had really strong people behind you. Tell us a little bit about being that organizational leader, where you have a team that you have. How do you build it? How do you have those? What do you look for in people as you're trying to figure out? This is what do I want to accomplish this year, this session, this term.
Sure.
Your ideas.
Earlier, Erik went through my bio. When I took over at the Department of Probation, Parole and Pardon Services, 20 years ago, I was 29 years old. Had some good experiences. I'd worked at 2 Fortune 500s and practiced law for a few years, but I didn't know a doggone thing about running anything. I just didn't. It was. I got there on the ground. Had a number of deputy directors at the agency who'd been there collectively in those positions for half a century. I mean, and my goal, I knew I'd be serving the governor for a few years. I wouldn't be there for the entirety of his term, was to not make any real structural change. And it became quickly evident that I was going to have to do that. My predecessor in the job had been there, worked his way up through the ranks. The governor liked him, asked me to keep him involved. And after spending just a little bit of time with him, he had my job before I got there, literally the day before I got there, realized he was an incredible talent and made him my chief of staff. And we began to reshape the agency, a law enforcement agency. Like so many law enforcement agencies, women had a very difficult time climbing the ranks of the agency. We conducted a salary study, determined that several of our staff people were underpaid, and we corrected that issue. And I made a promise to myself that we would that my successor would be a woman. And obviously, I was not the governor, so I couldn't guarantee that. But I could hire all deputy directors who were women, and that's what I did. Every one of my deputy directors were female, and 2 of them wound up becoming the next 2 directors of the agency after I left. We have our first female city manager at the City of Columbia, who was an incredible talent as well. Finding ways to, even consistent with the system that we have established, to just stretch a little harder, to think a little bigger about ways in which you can have thoughtful, inclusive leadership, making sure that we always operate from a position of love and compassion, but you don't compromise on the incredible talent out there. It helps you really step up your game.
Exactly. And now, in closing, what message would you give the students of the school and the worldwide audience that we have here today?
I would encourage everyone within the sound of my voice, if you've never thought about public service, to think about it. Think about running for office. Think about serving local office, state office, national office. This is indeed, even with all of its challenges, I still believe the greatest democratic nation in the history of the world. This is a place where someone who comes from a position of passionate leadership can really help change the arc of an entire nation. And if you change this nation, you change the world. We need good, thoughtful, talented people involved in the discussion. You've been given a very special skill set you've acquired over the course of your lives. You're surrounded with some of the most talented professionals in the entire world, right here, wherever you happen to be. Make a difference. Make a difference. The world needs you. This country needs you for sure. And your community, your city needs you.
Well, we feel grateful and honored to have you here at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And we appreciate your commitment and your love for your community, but also for the example that you give to so many people on a day-to-day basis. Everybody, again, all these folks in the stratosphere, you being on the ground and looking up too and doing everything you're doing makes a real big difference, and we're honored to have you here, and thank you for taking the time.
This is humbling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.